Meet the richest man in Pennsylvania, reportedly worth $30 billion.
His name is Jeff Yass, and he's rigging the rules of our society to work for his right-wing agenda.
We cannot let Jeffrey Yass continue to undermine democracy.
Sow division
and block progress for Black, brown, working class, and queer communities across Pennsylvania.
We need to bring to light his role in attempting to reshape our lives, society, and democracy.
No elected official should ever take money from Jeff Yass.
We need leaders who represent us and stand up to the billionaires.
It's time he's held accountable. Help stop Jeff Yass and billionaires like him from rigging the rules by taking 3 important steps.
1, end the uniformity clause in Pennsylvania so that billionaires pay what they owe to our communities.
2, pass campaign finance limits in Pennsylvania so billionaires like Jeff Yass can't give unlimited campaign donations.
3, pass lobbying reform bills like a gift ban so billionaires have less influence on legislation.
Learn more about Jeff Yass here.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the One Hood Power Hour. I'm Royce Jones. I'm your host for the evening. So as you heard in that intro video, we're talking about this very influential person. You may have heard stories this week about Jeff Yass, the richest man in Pennsylvania, and how he's using his money to allegedly buy influence in Pennsylvania elections and around the country. We know many of you might not know who this person is, so we got you covered. We'll talk to you about what he does and why this is such a huge deal for Pennsylvania politics and how it will influence or may have influence in our elections, how you can use your power, how you can make a difference. Before we get into it tonight, we want to give you a voting reminder that April 23rd is the primary election. These are some important dates that you might want to jot down. Polls are open on election day from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Last day to register to vote is April 8th, and the last day to request an absentee or mail-in ballot is April 16th. So I'm not doing this alone tonight. We want to welcome our guest, Aly Shaw. Aly is a researcher for LittleSis. We want to go ahead and welcome Aly. Aly, tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm Aly Shaw. I am a researcher with LittleSis, which for people who haven't heard of us, LittleSis is the opposite of Big Brother. And we do research for campaigns all over the country, for environmental campaigns, labor campaigns, anything related to social justice that requires power research or researching corporations and billionaires. And one of the campaigns I've been working on in Pennsylvania is a campaign focused on Jeff Yass, the richest man in the state, called All Eyes on Yass. And before I was a researcher, I was an organizer in Pittsburgh. I was an environmental organizer working on the lead and water issue here about 7 or 8 years ago. And then I worked for the United Food and Commercial Workers Union during the pandemic around 2020, 2023. And I've been doing this for a couple of years now, and I'm really excited to be able to tell everyone about this person who I've been sort of obsessed with the past couple of years, Jeff Yass.
So before we get into, what is that like? You dedicate a lot of time and focus and energy to researching, particular people. So what is that experience and that process like for you when you're assigned someone?
I really enjoy it, actually. It's why I got into research. You can kind of just get into all these rabbit holes and you feel like you're researching your ex or something on social media. You just really get in that mindset of digging into a rabbit hole on someone. And you lose track of time because you're so interested in what you're going to find out next. So it's fun for me, and it is even more fun when I get to do research that actually helps campaigns move forward or helps people learn about a new issue or topic, and just benefits the state and where we live in some way.
Right. And so that's a lot of what your work is focused on at LittleSis. Talk to us about what you sort of do with the information that you uncover and how it's helpful to people.
Yeah, so I mean, you can do a lot with research. Research can be anything. It could be looking up how much company made in profit that year, and use that when that company goes to squeeze their employees out of a couple bucks here and there, or maybe squeeze premiums out of their customers, like big health insurance companies do. And you can point to their profits and say, "This is how much you made. This is how much your CEO made. How can you sit here and negotiate over like a few cents for your workers?" So there can be that kind of research, or it can be opposition research where we, focus on a rich person or some company that's been doing bad things. Um, just kind of compile anything that could be used as leverage against them to win a campaign. Um, you know, Maybe you find out this company has been fined for air pollution in another state, and you
Mhm.
might want to use that for your campaign in Pennsylvania, or use similar tactics.
Yeah.
And in this case, this is about raising awareness. First of all, people, obviously, your audience and a lot of people are really interested in elections and want to support the right candidate, but it really takes just a little bit of research to figure out who's supporting each candidate, who's
Mhm.
financing their campaign. And this one guy, and this is not really unique to him. It happens all the time. He is able to fund lots of elections all around the country, and most people haven't even heard of him, even though he's had his hands in all these different local elections around the U.S. So um, in this case, it's more about just getting the word out there and holding him accountable to the influence he's having.
So who is this guy? Who is Jeff Yass? What have you been able to uncover about him, his life, his money, what he does with the money? Like, what is his tea?
Yes. So I'll start with the basics of who he is and how he's made his wealth. So Jeff Yass is the richest person in Pennsylvania. He lives in the Philly suburbs, and he got rich first by he tried to become a professional gambler actually, and did fairly well. And then him and his college buddies, who were all interested in gambling, started their own investment and trading firm called Susquehanna International Group, which is a pretty boring financial institution. If you have ever used the app Robinhood to trade stocks, they are the institution that allows you to do that. And they also have their own private investments. And one of those investments happened to be ByteDance, which is the company that owns TikTok. So this company, Yass, owns this investment firm, invested a couple $100,000 in TikTok many years ago. And in the pandemic, you might remember, TikTok got really big. It was already pretty big before the pandemic, and it just skyrocketed in popularity. So before 2020, Jeff Yass, just through his regular day job, was worth about $15 billion. Nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of money. And then overnight, whenever TikTok got big during the pandemic, his net worth actually doubled, and he's worth almost $30 billion now. So that's how he made his money. He's extremely right wing. He is a self-proclaimed libertarian, cares a lot about attacking public schools. School choice, as he calls it, or school privatization is his top issue. And he has used his massive growth in wealth to influence elections, mostly here in Pennsylvania, but increasingly everywhere in the United States. So he's given us some of the most right-wing politicians in the country, including Lauren Boebert, Ted Cruz. Um, he didn't always support Trump. He had a couple fights with Trump here and there. He spent a lot of money to try to get Trump's opponents elected in the Republican primary this year, but it seems like he is going to back Trump in the next election after all. And I can get more into TikTok and his relationship with Trump in a second, but essentially, he's a really, really wealthy guy, one of the wealthiest people in the United States, and has quickly become the largest conservative donor in the United States.
Do we know what his financial footprint looks like here in Pennsylvania in regards to political campaigns?
Yeah, so since about 2018, he has spent well over $60 million, and just for in Pennsylvania elections. And just for context, that is more than the top 10 to 15 corporations combined. So he is far and away the biggest donor in the state. He's the top donor to countless top Republicans and Democrats in the state, even though he's a Republican and a conservative donor himself. And that kind of power, that influence to be the top donor to so many of our legislators gives him more power than any other single person in the state, probably, other than, maybe the governor.
Yeah. So how does somebody like that, who pours all of this money into these political campaigns in his home state and across the country, how does he benefit from that? What are the rewards to him spending all of this money on campaigns?
Well, one benefit is that, and ProPublica did a great article expose on this a few years ago, is that all of that money spent on federal and state elections has allowed him to avoid paying almost $1 billion in taxes. And this is something a lot of billionaires and millionaires care about, avoiding paying taxes. They want to hoard all that wealth, and they have the resources to be able to influence policy to do that. So that's the first thing that he cares about. He doesn't want to pay taxes to public schools. He doesn't want to pay taxes to benefit his community or his state in general. And I think another thing is he is ideological, like a lot of billionaires. He made his wealth through capitalism and the free market as he sees it. And he wants it to stay that way. So he wants to be able to keep making money, keep benefiting from extracting resources and money from the people in our economy and off the backs of workers that work at all these companies he's invested in. He's heavily invested in the tech sector. And he wants it to stay that way. So he doesn't want TikTok to be banned because that would be bad for him. He doesn't want all these tech companies to be regulated or unionized. And by funding all of these right-wing politicians and paying off, Democrats or other Republican politicians in the state and everywhere, he can kind of sway public policy in that direction. Union busting, making sure the rich don't pay their taxes, making sure people don't have to pay into public goods like public schools or welfare benefits. So that's how he benefits financially, and I think he probably gets some satisfaction with this power complex that he has.
So we know TikTok is one of his big investments that he had a major return on. Are there any other companies that we may be familiar with that he's associated with?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like a lot of these investment firms, they're invested in hundreds of companies, but the top ones, other than TikTok in the U.S., are Amazon, Tesla, Google, Facebook, any tech company you can really think of that's publicly traded. They own, tens of millions of dollars in shares, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. So if you take Amazon, for example, has had a lot of worker issues in the past few years. Workers have been rising up and trying to unionize. It's just one example of one company that he has tens of millions of dollars invested in. And he is able to use this political influence to, possibly stop workers from being able to unionize in Pennsylvania or other states. I mean, there are countless companies that he's invested in, but the big tech companies, anyone that you could think of, he has a lot of money wrapped up in.
And of course, he's not the only one. Do we know any other names that might be familiar to us who are associated with him, who should also be on our radar besides Mr. Yass?
Yeah. Well, he does have a few friends nationally. Some you may have heard of, some you may not have. He does seem to be, somewhat connected to the Koch brothers. People might know them. They were the largest donors in the country for a long time. He's recently been working with Betsy DeVos, who was Trump's education secretary, did a lot of damage to public education in the US. He's been working very closely with her, working to spend tens of millions of dollars to end public schools around the country. And then he has some other, billionaire friends that are lesser known. This guy, Richard Uihlein from Illinois, is one of his buddies that is a really big donor to Donald Trump. They work really hand in hand at the national level to fund these right-wing groups, including Trump.
So on that, like how can this create, like, how does this help feed into creating division in our communities? Like, how pivotal are people like Jeff Yass and others in that, in perpetuating some of that division?
Yeah. So I'll use a couple examples, and I'll start by saying I don't think Yass really cares about abortion or critical race theory. He might, but I don't think that's his top issue. I think he cares much more about not paying taxes. But he knows that he can use these sort of polarizing, fear-based issues to divide us so that we don't, as working class, middle class people, see that it's actually billionaires and corporations that are controlling our politics. He knows that he can use these issues to divide us even further, and he does. So a couple examples, I'll start with Pennsylvania, is some of his money, that over 60 million I told you in the past couple election cycles, goes to the PAC of the PA Family Institute, which is the top Pennsylvania-based right-wing think tank that is leading the efforts to ban abortion in Pennsylvania, to attack trans kids in our schools, and spread misinformation about critical race theory in schools and stoke that fear among their base, their right-wing base, that, your kids are learning all these things about race and being, transgender in schools. And they use that in ads and mailers. They use, Yass's money to pay for these things, to try and stoke that division in Pennsylvania and get their base riled up so they'll come out to vote for politicians that don't really represent their interests, but happen to agree with them when it comes to, these social issues that are usually manufactured to stoke fear in their base. And he did the same thing in Texas really recently. In Texas, their governor ended up not being able to pass a school privatization bill last year. And Yass poured $10 million in just 3 months into the state, flipped 9 seats, maybe more, with that money, and used that money to run really racist ads in the state to unseat these Republicans by saying they support critical race theory, by saying they support LGBT issues. And, like I said, I don't think that's Yass's top issue or top concern, but it just proves that they know they can use these issues to divide us, and that ends up benefiting them politically in the long run and financially.
And it's like, it kind of makes you wonder too, sort of like, so he funds the ads get broadcast or shared or reposted, and like it almost makes you wonder, do people who are like running the ads have access to who is funding them, where they came from? Like, how do they, things like that, some of those, like what some people might call like propagandic like language and things, like how does that hit the airwaves?
Yeah, so there are these PACs. It's usually not a huge team. They hire consultants to do all the work, the videography, the production. They'll spend, a couple $100,000 on that. And then these, group of a small staff, usually a group of like 3 to 5 white men, will decide what ads they're going to run, and they'll use these millions of dollars just sent to them by this one guy in the span of a couple of weeks to just flood the airwaves, flood social media, flood, you see YouTube ads to hit one demographic, you run TV ads to hit another. And it is hard to track sometimes because oftentimes they don't report until after the election, or you don't know who's paying for that ad, even if it says this ad is paid for by the School Freedom Fund. The average person doesn't know what that is and isn't going to take the 20 minutes or 30 minutes it would take to look up who's actually behind that, and doesn't have the skills to be able to see who's behind that. And so they're just thinking, school freedom, that sounds good. This must be a real ad that's paid for by someone who has my best interests in mind. And they don't see that behind it, it's this billionaire who doesn't live in their state, who doesn't have their interests in mind. And it's just paying what's probably equivalent to a couple dollars for me out of his pocket, and ends up influencing the future of education and the future of, rights for a lot of people in that state. And yeah, it's one of the reasons why we need to get his name out there as the funder behind all these groups.
Yeah, and what those groups are, and some people would call the type of influential money that Jeff Yass has and others is being used dark money. Would you consider this dark money? Could you talk about what dark money is? Could you explain that too?
Yeah. So dark money is basically a term for any campaign or political spending that doesn't require them to report their donors. And, it's sort of a newer term. People might be familiar with the Citizens United Supreme Court decision that basically allowed corporations and individuals to spend any amount of money they want in our elections. Our elections are all privately funded. We have no, public support for people trying to run for office. It's all raising money from mostly corporations and billionaires. And dark money is any vehicle that allows these big wealthy donors or corporations to hide who they're giving money to. Now, luckily, there is actually still a lot of reporting out there. Super PACs have to report their donors, PACs, campaigns have to report their donors, and even some of these 501c3 nonprofit groups who don't have to report their funders. Sometimes they still do, or sometimes you can still find it. So we can still kind of get a sense of who is really controlling or influencing these elections. It's not perfect, and sometimes you have to wait for a leak to find out who is funding this one nonprofit that's really active in whatever issue. Like the NRA, the National Rifle Association, for example, is one of these groups that doesn't have to report their donors, even though they're very involved in politics. But because Jeff Yass and a lot of these billionaire donors donate publicly to super PACs and to PACs, we can kind of see how much they're spending and how much they're influencing elections in these different ways. It just takes a little bit of training on how to do that research. It can get really confusing. The federal races have a different way than state races, than local races, than county races. It can get really overwhelming if you're trying to really dig into who's funding these campaigns. So on a federal level, I like to just say, if you are interested in learning more about campaign finance, go to opensecrets.org. It's the best campaign finance site that's out there, especially on the federal level. It's how I was very easily able to look up who the biggest donor in the United States was, and right now it's Jeffrey Yass. And then on a state level in Pennsylvania, there's this site called transparencyusa.com. It is the same thing, essentially, just on a state level. Pennsylvania is a really frustrating state to try to find any information through. Their campaign finance website is really hard to use. So this website, Transparency USA, is a lot easier if you're looking. You can search your elected official on a state level and pretty simply see if they take money from Jeff Yass.
And how important is it for people to vote responsibly and conduct some of this research before they make a decision, whether it be Republican, Democrat, regardless of political affiliation? how important is it to just make sure that you're up to speed on what these elected officials are doing, what these candidates are doing before you go ahead and cast a vote for them?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously think it's important. I do my best to get that information out there so people can more easily find it. But I will also say, I mean, it's really hard. I do this for a living, and sometimes I find myself come election day, like trying to Google what the candidates are. No one has the time to really sit down. We have elections all the time. There are a lot of candidates. You're not going to learn everything there is to know about them. So it shouldn't have to require people to do this sort of research before they go vote. So, I mean, this is why it's so great for groups like One Hood Power to exist, who can get this information out in a more simple way to say, like, look, here's the deal with these candidates. You don't have to do all this research yourself. And a lot of groups have questionnaires, like One Pennsylvania. A lot of groups that we work with at this All Eyes on Yass campaign have these candidate questionnaires. Well, they'll do the hard questions for you to these candidates. They'll ask if they take money from Jeffrey Yass. So you just have to look over what their endorsed candidates are to make your decision. They make it a lot easier. That's what I use. There are some groups in Pittsburgh, like I rely on people like Summerlee or other politicians to do some of that research for me and to give me their opinion. But if you are interested in doing that in some races, if there's no one really paying attention or doing that for you, that's where I'd recommend going to Transparency USA, going to the Pennsylvania link, and just doing a couple minutes of research to see who is actually funding your local politician's campaign.
And one of the biggest questions that we have about all of this is, how does this impact our democracy? I want you to think on that for about 60 seconds, and we're going to go ahead and listen to a few words from our sponsor.
Meet the richest man in Pennsylvania, reportedly worth $30 billion. His name is Jeff Yass, and he's rigging the rules of our society to work for his right-wing agenda. He also funds anti-immigrant groups that supported the Muslim ban, public officials who aim to disenfranchise voters of color, and lobbying efforts to reinstate mandatory minimum sentences. We cannot let Jeffrey Yass continue to undermine democracy, sow division, and block progress for Black, brown, and queer communities across PA. It's time he's held accountable. Help stop Yass and billionaires like him by taking 3 important steps. 1. End the uniformity clause in Pennsylvania so that billionaires pay what they owe to our communities. 2. Pass campaign finance limits in Pennsylvania so billionaires like Jeff Yass can't give unlimited campaign donations. 3. Pass lobbying reform bills like the gift ban so billionaires have less influence on legislation. Learn more about Jeff Yass here.
So, of course, talking about billionaire Jeff Yass and his impact and influence that he has politically across the country, but especially here in Pennsylvania. Our guest Aly Shaw with us tonight from LittleSis talking about this. I mean, so Aly, how do we know, like, what do we know in terms of, like, we're saying, we say he is, right-wing affiliated and he has all of these, friends, Trump is a close friend, and others, like, you've done all this research, like, give me like the Venn diagram of, like, okay, he's here and like who he's all associated with. Like, do you have a wall at home that has like pins and stuff with who he's hanging out with or who he's friends with on, like, I don't know, TikTok or something? Like, what is his story?
Yeah. I don't have a wall, but LittleSis has a mapping tool that allows you to do that string on the wall thing on your computer. So that's literally what I use to keep all of this straight. Because it does, I mean, they try to make it complicated so that it's harder for people to research and get to see. But he does have this broad, it looks like a spider web, like network of PACs and groups that he sends money to. So that's what I have on my wall online. But in Pennsylvania, well, I'll start with Trump first, because that's, I think, what is going to be on the top of people's minds. Just recently, Yass was in the news because he went down to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Donald Trump, him and his wife. And, you know, we weren't in the meeting. I can't tell you exactly what they talked about. But after the meeting, Trump reversed his decision or his stance on banning TikTok. He said he didn't think it was a good idea to ban TikTok anymore after he met with this giant TikTok investor. So you can, you know, take from that what I think we all expected them to talk about. And then Trump came away from that meeting, you know, singing Yass's praises, calling him fantastic, saying that they're great friends. And he even said that he was going to start considering Jeffrey Yass to serve in his cabinet when he's president as Treasury Secretary, which is a huge reversal given that these two were not friendly with each other just a few months ago. Yass was spending millions of dollars to fund Chris Christie and Vivek Ramaswamy and all of Trump's opponents. And now they had this meeting. Trump agreed not to ban TikTok. And there's this huge reversal where, you know, this is how the sausage gets made, I guess, like these backroom political dealings. And now we're expecting, it hasn't happened yet, but we're expecting Yass in the next couple of months to start pouring millions of dollars into Trump's campaign. Okay. So that's how some of these relationships get formed. You know, it's unfortunately a pretty common occurrence. But in Pennsylvania, you know, Yass has similar connections to a lot of these right-wing, you know, Republicans around the state. And unfortunately has given money to a lot of top Democrats as well. Some of the top Democrats outside of Philadelphia, representing Philadelphia, like Joanna McClinton or even Jordan Harris, two of the top Democrats in the House, have taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from Jeffrey Yass in the past. You know, and a lot of people will say, well, they took that money and they did good things with it, which is certainly a fair point. But it does raise the question of should Democrats, including now a Democrat in Pittsburgh, Bhavani Patel, you know, benefiting from Jeffrey Yass's money, it raises the question, should Democrats be benefiting from this top Republican donor who is close with Trump, funds all of these issues that our party, our base doesn't stand for. And that's, I think, what we're going to start seeing in the next couple years is Democrats really having to face this issue head on. And I'll end with, outside of just politics, Jeffrey Yass also has close connections with these front groups and think tanks and nonprofits in Harrisburg that spend a lot of money on lobbying. So I don't think it's any coincidence that in the upcoming budget season, Jeffrey Yass's top issue that he cares about, which is school privatization and passing taxpayer-funded vouchers for private and charter schools, it's no coincidence that that is expected to be one of the top issues this year in Harrisburg. And it's because Yass's lobbyists on Capitol Hill or at the Capitol are making sure that that becomes the number one issue in the state, not the minimum wage being increased or, you know, passing affordable housing legislation. This is just the influence that he has. He can make school privatization the number one issue in the state, even though, you know, most Pennsylvanians wouldn't think that it was, you know, their top issue.
So do we know, like, is he a registered Republican? Has he always voted that way? Has he voted as Democrat in the past? Like, what business would he have donating to Democratic campaigns?
Yeah, as far as I know, I haven't looked this up recently, but as far as I know, he's always voted Republican. Like I said, he's a libertarian. I think has voted for libertarians mostly in the past. But it's not so much about you know, being registered as a Democrat or Republican. He's behaves like lots of corporations and billionaires do, where they don't just support one party. What we see is, to have real power, they have to support both parties because both parties are going to be in power at some point, and they want to hedge their bets to make sure they're remain in power, even if it's another party in the presidency, running the House or the Senate. And this kind of surprises people when they hear that Republicans or corporations give pretty evenly to both parties. In Yass's case, he gives a lot more to Republicans, but he wants to make sure he has influence over both parties. And he'll say that he supports Democrats in Pennsylvania that support school choice. And, that might pay off for him. He might peel off a few Democrats to vote with Republicans on his one issue. And if he gets his way, doesn't care if they have a D or an R next to his name, as long as they're doing what he ultimately wants.
And so what kind of red flags should be going off in voters' minds, specifically Democrats, whenever they hear that some of the people who they have voted for, are planning to vote for, are taking money from a person like Jeff Yass, who is the antithesis of everything that they believe in and stand for?
Yeah, I think it's a huge concern. And I know a lot of people that we've talked to around Pennsylvania would not like to see Democrats continue to take Jeffrey Yass money. And I think we've made real progress there. We've actually gotten some candidates to return Jeffrey Yass money, which they can do. They don't have to take it. And I think it's becoming a bigger issue this year because Jeff Yass has aligned himself with Trump and is becoming, more of a top donor on the national level. But I think ultimately people can exercise their right as a constituent. We've had people reach out to their state representative or state senator who's taken Jeffrey Yass money and just say, hey, I voted for you, or I support you in every other way. I just don't think you should be taking this guy's money. Give them some information on Yass and let them make a decision after that. I think you can use your voice or your organization's voice to tell your politicians that you don't think they should be taking money from this guy. And we'll, step up our pressure on them in the next couple months, especially as Yass's lobbyists push this school voucher issue in Harrisburg through the budget process. Yass really wants Pennsylvania to spend taxpayer money on charter schools and private schools. This is something he's wanted for a really long time. He spent lots of money to do it. And, he's not going to be satisfied until it gets done. And that's, one issue where if you don't agree with that and your politician or your elected official takes money from Jeffrey Yass, voice that to them. Find a way to get a meeting with them, call their office, email them. You can, put pressure individually or through organizations to get your elected official to return that money or stop taking it.
And, is this issue of dark money, what kind of impact do you believe that this has on our democracy, and how do we protect it? How do we protect our democracy from money like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough issue because, like I said, it's complicated and each level has different laws behind it. But I'll start by saying the impact this has on our democracy is everything. I mean, studies have shown that people with the most money in elections win. That's not true for every single race, but it's true enough that it's become a huge problem in this country. And it gives the wealthy and corporations more power over our democracy because, they are able to exert their influence over these politicians through these campaign donations. Politicians want to stay in office. They want to win. And to do that, they need money. And they're not going to vote against a corporation that's been funding their campaign for years. I mean, it's human nature. And that's why we just can't continue to let these corporations and billionaires get away with this. And it's also been shown that the policy preferences of billionaires and corporations get passed more easily and more often than the policy preferences and needs of the working class. It's not an accident that the minimum wage hasn't been raised in this country in years, and it hasn't been raised in Pennsylvania in years. This is why I think it also seems to so many people like election cycle after election cycle and year after year, even when there's Republicans or Democrats in charge, nothing really seems to change all that much. I know I've been frustrated by it just growing up in Pennsylvania and in the US, and I know a lot of people are frustrated by it. We did all this work to, elect good people to office, and it doesn't seem like anything really changes. And I think part of that is because these corporations and the wealthy are donating to both parties. They are hedging their bets. They're doing a pretty good job at making sure nothing really changes. The status quo is just maintained, and their money, their wealth is protected because they're able to control our elections like this. And I think I probably got away from your question there at some point, but I think, this is the core issue of why so many people are frustrated by our politics.
Yeah, and so it's funny to ask this question because my question is, well, what kind of policies can you put in place to address some of this? But it's kind of one of those things where, okay, so just as a voter, like, and after this conversation we're having, where like my mind might want to go is, okay, so I want to, what kind of policies should be in place? Well, who's voting on whether these policies are actually like solidified or codified or whatever in law? And, are some of the people who are voting on these policies people who have received money like this? So then why would they vote for like tighter regulations? I mean, what's the solution?
Right. Yeah, it's really a catch-22 or a tough situation because, we have been dealing with this in Pennsylvania. I mean, Pennsylvania has extremely loose campaign finance laws and extremely loose, like, gift laws. Lobbyists and corporations and anyone can give gifts to our legislators, and a lot of it doesn't even have to be reported. I mean, if that's not considered bribery, like, I'm not really sure what is. And some politicians are willing to pass legislation to ban that, but of course, if you're asking people to ban the very thing that gets them all these gifts and money and job security, of course they're going to be hesitant to do that. I mean, I wish people could pay attention more and hold them accountable to things like that, but there's a lot of issues to pay attention to. I mean, one positive thing is, last year Allegheny County did pass some campaign finance regulations. They basically just do what the federal government does, which is limit, individual and corporate donations to campaigns, which was great because in the past couple of years, there's been a lot of money in countywide elections. We saw that in the county executive race. A lot of corporations and billionaires unfortunately interfered in that race too. So I'm glad that they decided to do something about that. But that only affects county level races. So it doesn't affect the city of Pittsburgh. It doesn't affect Congress because that's, on a federal level. It doesn't affect state races. So you really have to do that across the board. And it starts with things like that, lowering contribution limits to, I would like to see it even lower, but right now it's a couple $1,000s, banning dark money, banning gifts being given from lobbyists to legislators, and finally, actually publicly funding elections so that it's an even playing field and anyone can run for office without doing this massive fundraising and talking to wealthy people and corporations all day. Because if that's who you're talking to fundraise money, I mean, that's your social network all of a sudden. And it really changes how you view the world and all these policy decisions, and just creates all the wrong incentives.
Yeah. By the way, this is sort of a pivot, but are you familiar with the Payback program?
Yeah, that's the group behind the All Eyes on Yass campaign is the Payback Coalition, which I
Okay.
can talk about a little bit more if you want.
Yeah. Would you dive into that for us?
Yeah. So Payback is an acronym we came up with a couple of years ago. It stands for Pennsylvanians Against Yass, Billionaires, and Corporations. And we're a coalition of people across the state, of base building groups and community groups across the state that have been working to hold billionaires and corporations accountable for their role in our democracy. I'll name a couple of the groups here that are involved so you can get involved more if you're interested. So obviously One Hood Power from Pittsburgh, the Alliance for Police Accountability right here in Pittsburgh, Power Interfaith in Philadelphia, Free the Ballot, Make the Road Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania Stands Up, and the Center for Coalfield Justice, and One Pennsylvania and the Action Center on Race and Economy are all groups that have bases of people active in politics in Pennsylvania, all across the state, in rural areas, cities, suburbs, all across the state, that have one goal, which is to get corporate and billionaire influence out of our elections and out of our policy making. And over the past few years, that has looked like trying to hold Jeffrey Yass accountable because he has played such a big and outsized role in our politics. And that has taken various forms. We want people to know his name, obviously, first and foremost. We want people to commit to stop taking his money, whether that's in elections or front groups. We want his money to be out of our politics and rejected by our elected officials. And we also want to make sure that in the end, billionaires and corporations are paying their fair share in taxes, because it's not enough to just get their money out of politics, although that'll be a huge step if we are able to do that. It's also about making sure they're paying their fair share to the public good. You know, it's just not fair that a billionaire is paying, you know, maybe a lower tax rate than some people in the working or middle class. We aren't able, as average Pennsylvanians, to just avoid paying a large sum in taxes. We don't get that kind of leniency. We don't have the lawyers to make that happen. So we're paying our fair share. Billionaires like Jeffrey Yass should be paying their fair share into our public education system, our state. You know, if he was taxed even, you know, a couple percentage points more than he is now, that could be millions or billions of dollars for our state that could go towards funding affordable housing, protecting kids all over the state and our public schools and funding our public schools. And we would probably have more money left over to buy, you know, houses for lots and lots of people. I mean, it's an immense amount of wealth that he's hoarded. It's hard for some people to picture what $1 billion looks like in your head. And we often think million and billion, you know, they're kind of interchangeable. $1 billion is $1 million. I wish I had a slide that we use to indicate what that looks like, but it's so much money that could be actually benefiting society. And instead it's being hoarded by this one man who happened to invest in the right company and is extracting money from workers and the working class all across the United States and the world. And we ultimately have to make that our goal, which is to make life better for everyone. And that starts with, you know, them getting out of our elections and finally paying what they actually owe to society.
And of course, it sounds like something Payback that people may want to get involved with. How can they?
Yeah, so first we have a website where you can learn more about Jeffrey Yass, of course, and sign up to get updates. So it's called alleyesonyass.com. Yass is spelled YASS. And if you're in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or in an area where one of these groups I listed is active, like Washington County with Center for Coalfield Justice, or outside of Philly with Make the Road and PA Stands Up, or in the Lehigh Valley or central Pennsylvania, look at our website and see what groups are involved. And I'll list the groups again just so people can get involved in them and make sure they're doing what they can in their own city. So One Hood Power and Alliance for Police Accountability are active right here in Pittsburgh, and I'm sure we'll have more information for people in the lead up to the primary and the budget season. And then in Philadelphia, Power, Free the Ballot, One Pennsylvania, also here in Pittsburgh. If you're active in politics and want to learn more about this campaign, talk to an organizer at one of those groups and see how you can get involved in what they're doing, because it's really a grassroots movement, and these groups are all taking it upon themselves to hold Yass accountable in their region of the state. And I mean, lastly, you already said it, but vote for politicians that do not take money from Jeffrey Yass and are committed to actually overhauling our election system and making sure that billionaires like him can't influence our democracy in this way.
And I didn't get to ask you about the Commonwealth Foundation. Could you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so the Commonwealth Foundation is a right-wing think tank based in Harrisburg. It's actually right across from the Capitol steps in Harrisburg, so you've probably passed it if you've been there. It's kind of a couple of different organizations, but essentially the staff that work there at this right-wing think tank, that basically what a think tank is they get paid to lobby and publish all of these reports and try to get media on their issues. The staff there are basically Jeffrey Yass's cronies that take his money and use it however they want. So Yass has a lot of money in a lot of different places. He can't probably know what to do with it at every single hour of the day, because it is so much money that it's actually taking probably 5 to 10 staff people to get it to the right places, to the right campaigns. So those are the people doing that. They're taking his money and using it for the purposes that they want. Whether that's to fund candidates for attorney general, they're currently backing the candidates for attorney general, auditor general, treasurer of the state. Elections all up this year. They're doling it out to right-wing candidates all over the state. They're giving it to Ammon Brown outside of Philadelphia, who's a Democrat right now. So they're the group in Pennsylvania that's really controlling Yass's money and where it goes. And then they're also spending millions of dollars over years on lobbying for taxpayer-funded school vouchers to go to private and charter schools, lobbying against the minimum wage. They're lobbying against climate legislation. All these things that we care about, they're the people that are trying to stop it. So that's why we have to pay attention to groups like that and call them out when we see it. They have an outsized influence. They're just a couple powerful guys that live in Harrisburg and get a ton of money and resources from billionaires. That's not like they have this, massive base like we do with the groups in the Payback Coalition. So it's, just an angry minority of people that unfortunately have a lot of power. And it does lessen their power when you call them out and pay attention to them, because they would prefer to be doing all of that in secret and behind closed doors. And we really have to make sure that our politicians and our elected officials know that they cannot be associating themselves with these people that are, doing all of this work to take people's rights away, to ban abortion, to make sure rich people don't pay taxes, to make sure our kids get a worse education. I mean, it's a lot of, really terrible stuff that they're doing on a regular basis with Jeffrey Yass's help. And more people need to know their name.
Because LittleSis is always watching.
Exactly. We're watching, keeping an eye on the powerful instead of the reverse.
I just, politics is just such a nasty game. And I think it goes beyond voting, right? Like, it's such a tough spot for us as voters to be in, because we have to sort of like micromanage the politicians that we're supposed to trust, and like where they're taking their money from, and like who's funding their campaigns, and who's keeping their, help keeping their lights on and helping them get in office, and it's who they're going to dinner with. Like, we have to like babysit that, and then babysit them and those actions and behaviors. And then we have no idea. Like you mentioned, Jeff Yass has money in all sorts of pots everywhere. Companies, corporations, big, small, politicians. like, what are we, you know what I mean? Like, so are we supposed to, like, how do we even know? You mentioned Amazon and a couple other like Tesla companies that he has investments in. He's not the only one. It's like, how do we dig ourselves out of this like trench that we're in where we just kind of like blindly spend? Like, I'm gonna name drop, for example, and like everybody out there, do what you do. Like, but I mean, I'm a Black queer man, and my friends, like they always like check me on like eating at Chick-fil-A, okay, all the time, um, or ordering from Amazon or whatever. Those can't be the only ones. Like, they're everywhere, right? It's ingrained. Like, it's not just those two. Like, I laugh because everybody like mentions the Chick-fil-A thing, but it's just like, it's not just that. It's in everything. How do we avoid it? Like, what are we supposed to do? We live in a capitalist society, and these rich, powerful, nasty people have all sorts of influence in where we spend our money. And I personally, I'm genuinely asking, like, what's your advice? Like, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, I mean, trust me, I've thought about that exact same question a lot in my own life. I mean, I'm also queer and have also eaten at Chick-fil-A after knowing all the terrible things that they do, and um, have friends that will drive me there, and have friends that would refuse to eat there. It's kind of down to your personal preference. So I just kind of think like, just try to make informed decisions. We're not going to be perfect, and like you said, it's so ingrained in our society and it's everywhere. It's kind of impossible to exist or live without doing something to support some bad corporation, and that's just an impossible standard to hold yourself to.
Yeah.
And you know so I would say if you're lucky to have time and resources to maybe not shop at Amazon and shop somewhere else, like, great, do that, and try to support your local grocery store, or something like that. But
Mhm.
if you don't have time and maybe you have kids and you need to order something off Amazon, of course I'd do it too. Don't beat yourself up over it. It's not you that's making Amazon this horrible company. It's just the world that we live in, unfortunately. So
Mhm.
just, do your best and try. And I think it's the same with politics, like, we don't all have time to research every single candidate or to go to every candidate forum and volunteer and canvas and all that all the time. But if you have the energy and feel like doing it, do it. If you have the energy to research and you have a presence on social media, post your research to social media. Say, like, hey, I found out my politician's taking this billionaire's money. I thought people should know. And, save that time for other people. Or if you do research on a candidate that you like and you support their positions, go actually talk to your friends and neighbors about it. I mean, I do that with my friends, um, where they'll ask me what I think of someone because they know I've been working on it, or vice versa. So think about people you trust, and that you would go to for advice, and ask them what they think about a politician. Um, and we're not going to be perfect. It's going to take a long time, and the struggle is called a struggle for a reason. It's because it takes a long time and a lot of work by a lot of different people. It's like a multi-generational thing, and we can just do our best and try to stay as informed as we can, and know that it's not going to be perfect, but we can try to make it better, um, by doing this kind of work and having these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, and I think definitely utilizing things like Payback and even like your research, just to be informed. Do you share your research, by the way, online? Like, can we access that? Anybody at home, if they want to go look at some of the things you've uncovered?
Definitely, yeah. You can go to littlesis.org. We actually just launched our new website today. So if you
Okay.
go, it's very pretty. It's a new website that we did with the Design Action Collective. And you can see our reports, and also our news has all of our latest research. My latest research was an article I did on Jeffrey Yass's relationship with Betsy DeVos and their campaign against public education around the country. So if you are interested in learning more about Yass, you can go to our website, littlesis.org. We do lots of research on lots of different topics, so you can really find kind of whatever you're looking for. And we also have a public database. It's where the name LittleSis originally came from, was our public database, where we call it the involuntary Facebook of the 1%. So we take all these rich and powerful people and put their information up, kind of like a social media page or a Facebook page, so that people on the ground and organizers can use that information for their campaigns. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up as an editor. You can make those maps that I was talking about, like the strings on the corkboard, if you're interested in that kind of thing. So yeah, just go to our website. LittleSis is little spelled out and then SIS. And you can play around with some of our tools there as well.
Okay. And we're getting towards the end of our discussion. We covered a lot. What should just be the biggest takeaway for everybody watching here today about Jeff Yass, campaign finance, dark money, and how it impacts our politics and our society and how we live?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think this is one of the defining issues of our generation, and one of the main reasons why we're kind of stuck in the place that we're stuck in the United States is because these billionaires and corporations have such a stranglehold over our politics and our elected officials. And I guess the thing I want to end with is, this is having an impact right here in Pittsburgh. We saw just the other day that a PAC that takes Jeff Yass money, called the Moderate PAC, did end up putting almost $300,000 into the congressional race in Pittsburgh, the seat that Summer Lee currently holds. This PAC used Jeffrey Yass's money to pay for ads targeting Summer Lee, calling her an extreme socialist and supporting her opponent. And, it hits right here at home. This is a race coming up, the primary. And, if you can at home, just make sure people in your life know who Jeffrey Yass is. If they see these ads, know that this is a right-wing billionaire funding it, not some Democratic donor or, donors raised locally. It's a guy who's probably, if he has been in Pittsburgh, it would probably for not very long. He doesn't live here. He's not going to be impacted by legislation here. He's only pouring money into this race because he doesn't want to pay taxes, and he's afraid that if people actually representing the working class get into office and stay in office, that his money is going to be on the line. So, make sure you spread the word about him. He's going to have a bigger and bigger impact moving forward in Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh. So it's really important that we start to hold him accountable.
And real quick, and you brought up you brought up a question in my mind, which is, can we go after him? Like, so let's say that there are some policies, and finally, legislators are like, okay, we're going to tighten up on some of these campaign finance laws. Can they then go after him for all of the tax money that he's been sort of dodging, or is he untouchable?
They could certainly go after him. I mean, I don't know the details of how he's avoiding taxes, but I'm sure the IRS could audit him, and we can certainly go after him in terms of raising taxes on him in the future, and then doing, regular accountability to make sure he's actually paying those taxes. I thought you were going to ask, can we go after him? Like, can we go to his business and take over the lobby? I was like, yes,
where are we going? Where are we off to?
Yes, his business is right outside of Philadelphia. We've been before, had actions outside of it, and we could tell that he was a little bit afraid. And it's just one of those things. Like, if he's going to do this, he cannot do it in secret or behind closed doors. Yeah. If he's going to be in the public eye, then he's going to have to expect people showing up at his office.
Wait, so what are his businesses?
So his business, his private investment firm, Susquehanna International Group, is just this, unassuming office building in the Philly suburbs in I think it's pronounced Bala-Cynwyd outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
So if you're ever in the area, you can drive by and see where he works. And we might be going there at some point this year. Who knows?
Anything here in Pittsburgh? Does he have any ties here that people might be interested in?
Not office buildings. He definitely has political allies here, but unfortunately nothing that we can go show up at their doorstep. But we are going to go to the Commonwealth Foundation probably later this year in Harrisburg to make sure that they don't take all of the attention away from issues like the minimum wage and public education. So we'll be doing some accountability for sure at his front group's offices.
All right, cool. Keep us posted on that. We ask everyone that we talk to this final question, and it is, what brings you joy? I think that I know part of that answer. I think we all do after getting to know you a little bit, but I'll let you tell us.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about it. I was gonna say I've been on crutches for the past 2 months. I had knee surgery recently, and only yesterday I was able to walk for the first time. So I will say, if you haven't been able to do it for a while, walking is really great. I used to go on walks all the time. So I'm happy to be able to be up and sort of moving again, and hopefully it'll stop snowing and it'll be nice to walk outside again. So that's what's bringing me joy today.
Oh, good. Okay, that's awesome news. Congratulations. Glad that you're on the mend. And yes, I'm also hoping for good weather for you, so you can feel the sun on your skin for your walks.
I know. I can't wait.
Coolness. All right. I guess before we go, it may have gotten lost. How can people get in contact with you and your organization?
Yeah, if people want to, we have a Twitter we're at LittleSis.com or LittleSis on Twitter. You can follow the All Eyes on Yass campaign at alleyesonyass.com or check out our website at littlesis.org.
All right. Awesome. I was going to make a funny joke and say, since it's X now, I guess it'd be like ZittleSis.
Yeah. we're going to just avoid that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you breaking all of this down for us. Very informative. Like I said, keep us up to date on everything that you have going on. Hope everybody out there today was able to walk away with something beneficial from this conversation as you plan ahead of the election, which, by the way, April 23rd is the primary election. Polls on election day are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Last day to register to vote is April 8th, and the last day to request a mail-in or absentee ballot is April 16th. Thank you for watching tonight and tuning into our One Hood Power Hour. Again, my name is Royce Jones. Hope you have a good rest of your week. Good night.
Meet the richest man in Pennsylvania, reportedly worth $30 billion. His name is Jeff Yass, and he's rigging the rules of society to work for his right-wing agenda. He poses a serious threat to queer communities and our democracy itself. Jeff Yass supports groups that would oppose legislation that will protect queer people from discrimination in housing, employment, and other public accommodations. We cannot let Jeffrey Yass continue to undermine democracy, sow division, and block progress for Black, brown, working class, and queer communities across Pennsylvania. It's time he is held accountable. Help stop Yass and billionaires like him from bending the rules with 3 important steps. 1, end the uniformity clause in Pennsylvania so that billionaires pay what they owe to our communities. 2, pass campaign finance limits in Pennsylvania so billionaires like Jeff Yass can't give unlimited campaign donations. Pass lobbying reform bills like a gift ban so billionaires have less influence on legislation. Learn more about Jeff Yass here.